Welcome to Close Your Eyes, Listen to Stories. Close your eyes, relax, and let me take you into the story. If you want to meet Anubis properly, it helps to begin where green fields end. The Nile leaves behind reeds, mud, grain, and the patient labor of the living, and beyond that fertile strip the land turns dry and pale. There, on the edge of the desert, ancient Egyptians built their tombs. There, too, jackals and other wild canids wandered among the burial grounds, light-footed and watchful. Out of that uneasy meeting between grief and scavenger, fear and reverence, a god took shape. Anubis was not imagined as a beast that came to violate the dead. He became the power that could keep such violation away. He is one of the oldest divine figures in Egyptian religion, older in his funerary importance than many listeners first realize. In the earliest periods, before Osiris gathered the full majesty of the underworld around himself, Anubis already stood close to the realm of the dead. His Egyptian name is usually rendered Inpu or Anpu, and his image is instantly recognizable. A sleek black canid lying alert on a shrine, or a human figure with the head of a jackal. Yet even that familiar description hides a small uncertainty. Scholars still note that the animal may not have been a true jackal in the strict modern sense. It may have drawn from several desert canids at once. The myth did not need zoological precision. It needed the feeling of a graveyard sentinel who knew the margins better than any human guard. The black color matters. Real desert jackals are not black like polished obsidian, yet Anubis almost always is. In Egyptian symbolism, black could suggest decay, but it also meant fertility and renewal, the rich silt left by the Nile after floodwater withdrew. It was the color of soil that seemed dead for a time and then broke open with life. So Anubis, black as resin, black as river mud, became a funerary god who held corruption and rebirth in the same image. He belongs to the tomb, but he is never only about ending. He is about safe passage through change. His old titles deepen that feeling. He is often called he who is upon his mountain, as if he stands above the necropolis and watches every approach. He is lord of the sacred land, meaning the burial ground set apart from ordinary habitation. In some early contexts, he carries the title foremost of the Westerners. The West, where the sun goes down, was closely linked in Egyptian thought with the country of the dead. To say Anubis was foremost, there was to place him near the gate between visible life and what lay beyond it. And yet he does not feel like a distant monarch. Even at his most formal, Anubis remains a god of closeness. He is near linen, oil, resin, amulets, hands laid gently upon a wrapped chest. He is near the anxious family who wants the body kept whole. He is near the tomb entrance sealed against weather and theft. Ancient Egyptian religion could be grand, full of solar boats and kingly monuments, but it was also intimate in its dealings with death. Bodies had to be prepared, names had to endure, a mouth had to be ready to speak again in the next life. Anubis lives in that tender practicality. Later myth gave him parents, though not always the same ones. In one common later tradition, he is the child of Nephthys and Osiris, hidden and protected after a dangerous birth. In another, he is linked to Set instead. These genealogies shift with time and region, and it is wiser to treat them as later theological arrangements than as one fixed original truth. What remains constant is the character those stories are trying to explain. Anubis belongs among gods touched by danger, secrecy, mourning, and rescue. If you imagine the earliest Egyptians looking toward the tomb fields at dusk, You can sense why this god endured. The desert wind moves softly over mastabas and stone markers. A real canid appears on a ridge, stops, and studies the silence below. It is easy to see how a people who wished desperately to protect their dead could transform that troubling sight into a guardian instead of an enemy. Religion often works that way. It takes what threatens the human heart and gives it a sacred task. So Anubis enters the imagination not with the blaze of a sun god or the thunder of a warrior, but with a quieter authority. He watches. He waits. He knows where the living stop and the dead begin. Before judgment, before elaborate books of the afterlife, before later empires translated Egyptian gods into new names, there's this dark figure at the edge of cultivated land, ears raised, body still, keeping vigil where the desert meets the tomb. Anubis becomes even more memorable when you follow him into the most famous funerary drama in Egyptian myth, the death of Osiris. This is the story that changed the religious landscape of Egypt, and Anubis stands within it not as the loudest figure, but as one of the most necessary. If Osiris is the murdered king who becomes lord of the dead, Anubis is the one who makes that transformation possible. The broad outline is familiar. Osiris, ruler and benefactor, is betrayed by Set, enclosed in a chest, and in many tellings cut apart and scattered. Isis searches with relentless devotion. Nephthys mourns beside her. The body must be found, gathered, restored. Egyptian myth does not treat the corpse as something spiritually irrelevant. On the contrary, the body matters intensely. Form, identity, and ritual care all belong together. This is where Anubis enters with extraordinary calm. Later tradition credits him with embalming Osiris, making him the divine patron of mummification. The story is easy to underestimate because embalming lacks the spectacle of a cosmic battle. Yet in emotional terms, it may be one of the most moving tasks any god performs. Anubis does not win the world by force. He kneels beside what has been broken and refuses to let it remain only ruin. He washes, anoints, wraps, guards, and restores shape. When Egyptian embalmers worked in the Wabit, the pure place, or in the house of embalming, they were not simply doing a technical job. They were echoing a divine precedent. Some ritual specialists wore masks of Anubis during funerary ceremonies, not to imitate him theatrically, but to let his presence descend into the rite. Human hands handled linen and natron. Human fingers sealed amulets into place. But mythically, Anubis was the one who first showed how reverence could become method. The image of him leaning over the body of Osiris became one of the most enduring in Egyptian art. You can see why. His long canine muzzle lowers toward the wrapped dead with an almost unbearable stillness. He is not weeping in wild grief like some mourners in tomb paintings. He is composed. He has work to do. That composure is part of his gentleness. A frightened family does not only need shared sorrow. It needs someone who knows what comes next. In some later temple traditions, Anubis is accompanied by Kebehuet, a daughter associated with cool, purifying water. Her presence adds another small note of tenderness. Even the body being prepared for eternity is imagined as needing refreshment and relief. Egyptian funerary religion could be exacting, but never wholly cold. It recognized fatigue, dryness, longing, and the desire to be soothed. Anubis also stands close to rites that prepared the deceased for life beyond burial, especially the restoration of the senses. The so-called opening of the mouth ritual performed on a mummy or statue, symbolically returns speech, sight, and breath. Different priests and divine powers participate in various versions of that ceremony, yet Anubis belongs naturally in its atmosphere. He is the god who does not let death remain mute and unfinished. He helps make the next world inhabitable. There's a paradox here worth resting with. Anubis is a god of death, but his most sacred action is preservation. He does not delight in decay. He resists it. He does not erase mourning. He gives mourning a disciplined form through which love can continue as care. In that sense, mummification in ancient Egypt was not merely a refusal to accept mortality. It was a way of saying that the person who had been loved deserved accuracy, protection, and continuity. Anubis became the divine guarantee of that claim. This is also where his relationship to Osiris deepens. Once Osiris rises as ruler of the dead, Anubis is not discarded. He becomes indispensable in a more specialized way. Osiris reigns, judges, and embodies the hope of rebirth. Anubis prepares, escorts, and protects. One god is the enthroned mystery at the center of the underworld court. The other is the trusted figure who gets you safely there. Many religions have majestic rulers of the afterlife. Fewer have a deity so carefully associated with the practical kindness of preparation. So if you picture Anubis only as a black-headed judge beside a scale, you miss one of his most beautiful dimensions. Before the scales, before the verdict, before the soul reaches any throne room, there's a chamber scented with resin and linen. Lamps burn quietly. The body lies still, and near it is Anubis, neither hurried nor afraid, teaching through sacred action that what death has touched may still be handled with skill, honor, and a kind of grave mercy. If you leave myth for a moment and walk into the daily religious life of ancient Egypt, Anubis becomes even more vivid. He was not only a figure in old stories. He was present in tomb decoration, funerary equipment, priestly ritual, amulets, and the architecture of fear itself. Wherever a person worried about the vulnerability of the dead, Anubis was near. One of his most telling titles is He Who is in the Place of Embalming. Another is He Who is Upon His Mountain. These names place him exactly where anxiety gathers, in the workshop where the body must be preserved, and on the high edge overlooking the necropolis where danger may approach. Egyptian tombs were built to last, yet every tomb was also a fragile proposition. Sand shifted, thieves watched, animals prowled, memory could fail. The dead needed both ritual power and surveillance. Anubis supplied both in sacred form. That is why his recumbent image became so beloved. Again and again you find the sleek black canid stretched on a shrine, forepaws extended, ears attentive, gaze level. He is at rest, yet never asleep. In the tomb of Tutankhamun, one of the most striking objects is a shrine topped by such an Anubis figure, black, elegant, and alert even after millennia. It feels less like decoration than like condensed theology. The tomb is sealed but not abandoned. A watcher remains. There are stranger symbols too. Among the most ancient is the Imyut, often called the Immyut fetish, a skin-like form tied to a pole and set in a pot or base, associated with Anubis in funerary scenes. Its exact meaning is still debated, which only deepens its power. It may preserve a memory of archaic rites far older than the polished explanations later theologians preferred. With Anubis, this happens often. He is at once clear in function and mysterious in origin, as if the oldest layers of burial religion never entirely stopped whispering beneath the later temples. Ordinary mourners met him through ritual. Priests invoking his protection worked around the mummy, around the coffin, around the tomb entrance. Spell by spell, gesture by gesture, the deceased was transferred from human vulnerability into divine guardianship. Egyptian religion did not imagine the afterlife as automatic. It required preparation, correct naming, moral standing, and protection against hostile forces. Anubis helped secure that chain. He also remained close to the landscape itself. Necropolises often stretched along the western desert margins, and his titles make sense in that geography. You can imagine him stationed above the tomb field, beyond the irrigated world, where wind polished stone and the sun dropped red behind distant cliffs. He belongs to thresholds in the most literal sense. Not the center of the village, not the fertile field, the edge, the place where one condition gives way to another. As Egyptian religion evolved, Osiris rose to dominant prominence as king of the dead, especially from the Middle Kingdom onward. A lesser god might have faded under that shift. Anubis did not. He changed without losing identity. Instead of ruling the entire dead realm, he became the consummate specialist of burial, guardianship, and transition. In many religious systems, specialization can make a deity feel smaller. With Anubis, it made him more intimate. The believer who feared what might happen to one body, one tomb, one uncertain soul, could turn to him with a precision that a grand underworld monarch did not always offer. By the late period, devotion to him could become almost astonishingly material. At Saqqara, archaeologists have uncovered vast galleries filled with mummified dogs and other canids offered in his honor. The numbers run into the millions. Not every animal was a cherished household companion, and the practice had its own institutional economies, but the sheer scale tells you something unmistakable. People wanted a tangible way to address the god who stood closest to the dead. They brought his own image back to him in life after life after life. All of this gives Anubis a strangely layered personality. He is archaic, almost primeval in some symbols. He is professional in ritual. He is affectionate in function, though rarely sentimental in expression. He can be represented as a sleek animal, a divine embalmer, a towering guardian, or a quiet emblem on a coffin wall. And through every form runs the same promise. The sacred land is not unguarded. If you rest a moment inside that promise, you can feel why his worship lasted. Human beings have always known that burial is an act of love made under pressure. You want to do everything correctly, but you also know how much lies beyond your control. Sand, time, distance, forgetfulness, trespass, error. Anubis enters exactly there, in the space between devotion and helplessness, and offers the image of a being who never leaves his post on the hill above the tombs. For many people, the most unforgettable image of Anubis comes from funerary papyri now grouped under the modern title book of the dead. There he appears beside a scale, poised, exact, black-headed and steady, while the fate of a soul hangs in careful balance. If segment 2 shows his tenderness and segment 3 his vigilance, this part of his story reveals his precision. The Egyptian afterlife was not imagined as a vague drifting into shadow. It involved gates, declarations, names, threats, protections, and, above all, moral reckoning. The deceased hoped to reach the hall of two truths, where the heart would be weighed against the feather of Ma'at, goddess and principle of truth, balance, and rightful order. The scene is famous now, but it was not merely decorative. It expressed a deep conviction that a life leaves a measurable shape behind it. Anubis oversees that measure. He leads the dead into the court. He adjusts or inspects the scales. He makes sure the weighing is properly conducted. Nearby stands Thoth, ibis-headed recorder of wisdom and writing, ready to note the result. Not far away crouches Ammit, the devourer, part crocodile, part lion, part hippopotamus, waiting for the heart that proves too heavy with wrongdoing. And beyond them sits Osiris enthroned, ruler of the justified dead. It is a powerful composition, yet Anubis is often the figure who draws the eye first, because he is the one in motion, attending to the exact point where truth becomes visible. The heart, in Egyptian thought, was more than an organ. It was memory, conscience, intention, the inward record of what a person had been. The brain, by contrast, did not receive the same moral emphasis in funerary practice. That is why the heart was so crucial in judgment, and why some burials included heart scarabs inscribed with pleas that the heart not rise as a witness against its owner. There is something deeply human in that prayer. Even in hope, people feared being known too accurately. Anubis, however, is not a god of flattering distortions. He does not make the scale lie. That is part of what gives him dignity. He is compassionate in preparation, but honest in transition. If he protects the dead, he does not do so by erasing the moral weight of a life. He protects the integrity of the process itself. In a religion filled with spells and sacred names, Anubis remains associated with trustworthy procedure. This is one reason he feels so balanced as a divine personality. Some gods save, some judge. Anubis does both, but not in the same way. He preserves the body because each person deserves careful handling. He escorts the soul because no one should face the unknown alone. Yet when the moment of weighing arrives, he does not step in as a partisan friend who tips the scale. He becomes the sacred custodian of fairness. Chapter 125 of many Book of the Dead manuscripts presents what modern scholars often call the negative confession, in which the deceased declares before a panel of divine beings what wrongs he or she has not committed. I have not stolen. I have not murdered. I have not cheated the offering tables. I have not caused suffering without cause. The exact formulations vary, but the moral atmosphere is unmistakable. The soul must speak in truth, not merely in fear. Anubis stands close to that atmosphere because he belongs wherever passage depends on order rather than chaos. It is easy to imagine this court as terrifying, and surely it was meant to inspire awe. Yet there is also reassurance in its structure. The universe is not random. The dead are not flung into darkness without witness. There's a procedure. There are standards. There is a divine official whose role is not to mock weakness, but to see that the soul receives a proper hearing. For a civilization that cared intensely about justice, balance, and the continuation of the self, that image had profound comfort in it. You can feel that comfort in the artistry of the papyri. Rows of hieroglyphs flow with practiced elegance. Gods stand in orderly relation. The scale is drawn with almost loving clarity. And Anubis, so often rendered in dense black against pale ground, becomes the visual anchor of the scene. He is death without panic, judgment without frenzy, the composed attendant of truth. So when Anubis appears beside the scales, he is doing more than performing one famous task. He is revealing the ethical side of threshold keeping. To guide someone into the next world is not enough. One must also guard the honesty of that crossing. The dark jackal god who once watched over desert tombs now watches over the inward weight of a human life. And he does it with the same still attention he brought to the silent chambers of the dead. One of the most interesting things about Anubis is that he did not vanish when Egyptian religion changed around him. Many gods rise brilliantly in one period and dim in another, but Anubis endured through Old Kingdom tomb culture, the great Osirian transformation of the afterlife, the late period, and even into the Greek and Roman worlds. He survived because he occupied a need that never stopped feeling real. At first, as older titles suggest, he may have held a broader authority over the dead. Then Osiris, with his powerful myth of murder, restoration, kingship, and rebirth, became the central sovereign of the underworld. Anubis might have been overshadowed by that change. Instead, he became sharper in outline. He was the embalmer of Osiris, the guide of the deceased, the attendant of judgment, the keeper of cemeteries, the one who knew the road between loss and continuance. In historical terms, that may be a reduction of rank. In religious terms, it is refinement. His imagery remained durable because it was so visually strong. A falcon may suggest height and royal sweep. A ram may suggest force. But the black desert canid suggests watchfulness at ground level, exactly where human anxiety about burial begins. That made Anubis portable across centuries. He could be painted on papyrus, carved on coffins, cast as a bronze votive, or shaped as a shrine guardian. He was immediately recognizable, and recognition matters in devotion. The archaeological record preserves striking signs of that long life. The dog catacombs at Saqqara, associated with his cult, show devotion on a scale almost difficult to imagine. Endless galleries of mummified canids were placed underground as votive offerings. Whatever else one says about the economics of temple religion, this tells you that Anubis was no obsolete relic in the later centuries of Egyptian history. People still came to him in numbers vast enough to fill corridors with dark small bodies wrapped in faith. There were also elegant royal expressions of his presence. The recumbent Anubis shrine from Tutankhamun's tomb remains one of the great masterpieces of funerary art. Black body, gilded details, linen once wrapped around it, the whole figure placed as if poised between sculpture and living guard. It captures the exact mood his cult knew so well. He is beautiful, but beauty is not the point. He is on duty. When the Greeks entered Egypt and the Ptolemaic world braided traditions together, Anubis found another afterlife. Greek writers often compared him to Hermes because both could guide souls. Out of that comparison came Hermanubis, a blended form known in the Hellenistic and Roman periods. On magical gems and certain images, you can find a canine-headed figure carrying attributes that belong to the Greek messenger god. It is an extraordinary transformation, yet not an illogical one. A deity of passage is especially suited to crossing cultural boundaries. This blending did not erase his Egyptian core. Even when translated into Greek categories, he remained linked to tombs, mummies, the dead, and the movement between worlds. In a way, the syncretism proved his resilience. A lesser god might have been replaced. Anubis was reinterpreted because people still needed what he represented. He knew how to stand between languages, just as he had long stood between life and death. His family stories also remained flexible. In one later strand, he is the hidden child of Nephthys, discovered and nurtured by Isis. In another, he belongs more closely to Set's line. Egyptian myth was not always concerned with pinning every divine relationship into one fixed chart, and Anubis benefited from that freedom. His identity rests less on dynastic drama than on function and presence. You know him by what he does. He guards, he prepares, he leads, he weighs. That functional clarity helps explain why modern culture still reaches for him so easily, even when it simplifies him. Museums place him at the center of galleries on death and mummification. Novelists and filmmakers borrow his silhouette whenever they want ancient Egypt to feel immediate. Popular imagination sometimes turns him into a darker, more menacing figure than the old religion did, but the endurance of the image is still meaningful. A god who can be recognized from his profile alone has crossed a very long historical distance. Anubis survived because threshold figures are hard to replace. Kingdoms change, languages mingle, priesthoods rise and fall. Yet the dead still need tending, the tomb still needs guarding, and the human heart still longs for someone competent, incorruptible, and calm at the moment of passage. Ancient Egypt gave that longing a black muzzle, tall ears, and a pair of steady hands. When a god lasts this long in memory, it is usually because he embodies more than one fear at once and answers them with more than one comfort. Anubis answers the fear that the body will be neglected. He answers the fear that the soul will lose its way. He answers the fear that judgment will be chaos. And he answers all of them not with noise, but with composure. That may be why he still feels so alive. Modern retellings often emphasize his mystery, and that mystery is real. The black head, the fixed ears, the desert stillness, the silence of tomb chambers and painted coffins all cling to him. Yet what endures most deeply is not menace. It is trustworthiness. If many gods in world mythology shine, rage, seduce, conquer, or deceive, Anubis is memorable because he attends. He remains present through the slow, difficult stages other powers might find beneath them. There is something profoundly humane in that. Ancient Egyptians understood that death was not one event, but a series of needs. The body had to be tended. The name had to be spoken. The tomb had to be protected. The soul had to know where it was going. The heart had to be ready for truth. Anubis belongs to every one of those needs. He is not merely the god at the end. He is the god of all the careful work between end and continuation. That is why even the smallest details around him feel tender when you linger with them. The linen wrapped layer by layer, the amulet tucked close to the chest, the black shrine guardian placed near a coffin, the prayers asking for safe roads through the duet, the image of a god who does not recoil from the still body, but bends near it with professional gentleness. These are not the gestures of abstraction. They are the gestures of care. Archaeology keeps renewing that impression. A painted papyrus unfolds, and there he is at the scale again. A burial chamber opens, and there is the recumbent canid guarding a sealed mystery. A temple catacomb yields thousands upon thousands of votive dogs, and suddenly devotion that might have seemed remote becomes almost overwhelming in its material persistence. People loved this god enough to keep making offerings to him century after century, not because he was fashionable, but because he answered a durable sorrow. He also persists because his symbolism is beautifully balanced. Black, in his image, is the color of mourning, but also of fertile renewal. The canid evokes danger at the graveyard edge, but transformed into protection. The scale evokes judgment, but also fairness. The desert evokes emptiness, but also a clean horizon where one world ends and another begins. Anubis gathers these opposites without strain. He is solemn without becoming hopeless. If you leave the temples and return in imagination to the Western necropolis, you can feel that balance settle around the stones. Sand cools after heat. Painted walls darken softly inside sealed chambers. Somewhere beyond the last built tomb, a black figure keeps his post on higher ground. He is not hurrying the dead away. He is making sure no one enters the next condition unattended. Perhaps that is the quiet reason belief in him still speaks across so many centuries. You do not need to share the full theology of ancient Egypt to understand the longing behind Anubis. You only need to know what it is to wish that the vulnerable be treated gently. You only need to know what it is to hope that truth, when it comes, will be measured carefully rather than violently. You only need to know what it is to stand at any threshold and want a guide who will not abandon you there. So let Anubis remain where he has always been strongest, at the edge, neither wholly of this world nor wholly away from it. Let him watch over the tomb mouth, the embalming table, the papyrus scale, the winding road through the duet. Let the desert stay broad and quiet around him. Let the black fur catch no light except a soft one. And let his final gift be the oldest one he offered the people of Egypt. The sense that even in the presence of death, care can still be exact, protective, and unafraid. And that's where this story comes to a rest. Close your eyes, carry this story with you, and slowly drift off to sleep. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to Close Your Eyes, Listen to Stories. There's always a new story waiting for you here. Sweet dreams.